Alright, what's going on everyone? Today I am going to predict with absolute 100% accuracy which decks are going to be made into challenger decks this year. So I do this every year and I very consistently get 3 out of the 4 decks right. So 75% of the time I am right, 100% of the time. Pretty sure that means I'm perfectly accurate. That's how math works. Ask your math teacher. It's how it works. So with absolute 100% accuracy, we're going to predict the challenger deck. So first off, I'm fairly certain that Mono Green Stompy will be a deck again. This was a deck last year. It will be a deck this year again because this deck was very good a couple months ago when this deck was being built. It's still a very good deck. This is the deck that plays, like Werewolf Pack Leader, Old Growth, Troll, Ezekiel's Chariot. So the basic idea here is you're just trying to play the best creature each turn. Like you want the best 2-drop with Werewolf Pack Leader, you want the best 3-drop with the Troll, you want the best 4-drop with Ezekiel's Chariot, and you basically just want to keep ahead of your opponent constantly by having the best creature on board every turn. And for the most part, if these decks don't suck, and I want to make another video about that, but assuming that these decks are actually good this year, for the most part this deck can stay intact. Like a Werewolf Pack Leader is currently $5 each, so there's no reason not to have 4 of those. The Chariot is like $2.50 each, so no reason not to have 4 of those. One of the issues is probably Ranger class, which is more expensive than you would expect. It's like $7 each. So maybe like 1 or 2 of those gets cut. Maybe it only plays 2 or 3 copies. The big issue is probably Ren 7, which currently is $20 each. So I wouldn't expect, 3 of these or whatever. I would expect 1 at the most. Like this would be the big money card, 1 copy of Ren 7, right? Like a $30 deck with a $20 Ren 7. If these decks are good, like, the first couple rounds, I would expect 1 Ren 7. But of course, these decks have declined over the years, so we'll see. But I would expect 1 copy of Ren 7, and I would expect most of the deck to still be intact. Oh, another issue is the lands. The deck does play snow-covered lands and Faceless Haven. I expect that to be adjusted. Probably not the full 4 copies of Faceless Haven. Maybe not even snow-covered lands. Maybe they just cut snow entirely. That wouldn't surprise me. But yeah, for the most part, besides that, should be just fine. Next is it Dragons? Of course, this deck gets made. It was the World Championship deck, and I think a deck that wins the World Championship will probably be made into a challenger deck. So this is the deck that has Smoldering Egg, Goldspan Dragon, and Allrun's Epiphany as like the main win condition, right? Smoldering Egg flips into a dragon, Goldspan Dragon, Big Dragon, and Epiphany gives you multiple turns to get multiple attacks with these. And then the rest of the deck is just control. It's burn spells, bounce spells, counter spells. It's a control deck. It's a blue-red control deck that sort of combo kills with Allrun's Epiphany and dragons. It can attack for like 20 damage in one go. So the big issue with this deck is Goldspan Dragon. Goldspan Dragon is currently over $30 each, and it typically plays 4 copies. There's no way this deck will have 4 copies of Goldspan Dragon. It'll probably only have 1, and they'll probably fill those other 3 slots with just other dragons, because this deck, it's been called Is It Turns. Technically, the Is It Turns deck is a little bit different. It tries to copy Allrun's Epiphany, but it's been called Is It Turns. It's been called Is It Control. Some people call it Is It Dragons. Wizards of the Coast officially called this Is It Dragons, so I expect them to call it Is It Dragons or some kind of dragons in the title of the challenger deck. And they probably want to put more dragons into the deck to kind of sell that, make that the marketing strategy of the deck. It's a exciting dragons deck, so I would expect 3 Goldspan Dragons cut because of budget concerns, and then a variety of dragons added to kind of spice up that dragon name. Most of the rest of the deck should still be intact. Most expensive cards outside of that Goldspan Dragon are Expressive Iteration, Memory Deluge, and Allrun's Epiphany. All of these are critical cards, but they're not so expensive. Allrun's Epiphany, $10 each, so I don't think there'd be any problem printing at least 2 of them in the deck. Memory Deluge, currently $6 each. I could see them cutting 1 or 2 of those as well, but I would expect some Memory Deluge in the deck. And Expressive Iterations are currently like $6 to $7 each, but it's an uncommon, so I would expect them not to be too concerned about that and probably just put all 4 in, I hope. So I expect Is It Dragons mostly intact with the exception of Goldspan Dragon. And the mana base and stuff, of course, as always. It should be noted, the mana base is always going to get cut. They're going to take all the pathways out and stuff. After that, we have Mono White Aggro. Mono White Aggro definitely becoming a challenger deck. Not only is this the most popular deck right now, but it was the second most popular deck at the World Championship after the Is It Dragon, Is It Turns decks. So yeah, the idea behind this deck, it's just aggro. You're just trying to play efficient creatures, Usher of the Fallen, Intrepid Adversary, Adeleine, Resplendent Cathar, fast aggressive creatures that are ahead of the curve, and you're trying to end the game as quickly as possible. For the most part, a lot of this deck is bulk. One of the only issues with the deck is probably Intrepid Adversary, which are currently just under $10 each, and the deck typically plays 4 of them, so I would expect some of these to get cut. Maybe the deck goes down to like 1 or 2 of them maybe. The same thing goes with Luminarch Aspirant. These are like $5 each. So I can see them going down to maybe 3 of them, but the rest of the deck is pretty cheap. I mean, some of the most expensive cards are like Adeleine is $3 each, Elite Spellbinder also like $3 each. So I would expect this to be mostly done out of the box, maybe with a couple Intrepid Adversaries cut. Oh, and this deck also plays Faceless Haven. Faceless Haven is going to be interesting with these decks. I imagine like most decks are only going to play like 1. Like maybe they put 1 Faceless Haven in each deck or something. Kind of like what they do with Commander decks, right? Every deck has a Soul Ring. Maybe all these decks are just going to have 1 Faceless Haven, but Faceless Haven basically an issue with all these decks. But for the most part, besides that, I see the deck being basically done out of the box. I imagine most of its bulk. And then the last deck gets very, very interesting. So if I was going to predict based on the metagame right now, it's very obvious. It's just mono black control. This is pretty straightforward, pretty easy. When Wizards of the Coast makes these decks, they want to represent all colors, right? Because if you have a favorite color to play, they want a challenger deck to have that color. If you really like playing blue, they want at least 1 deck to have blue. You really like playing green, they at least want 1 green deck. So with green Stompy, white aggro, and Is It, we have 4 out of 5 colors. We're missing black, and mono black control right now is one of the most popular decks in Standard. It's, I think, currently the second most played deck, although it's starting to lose some steam. Orzhov control is becoming more popular at the moment, but the point is, this makes perfect sense. The big issue, the problem is, this deck wasn't as popular like a month or 2 ago when these decks were likely being created, because they make these decks months ahead of time. I talked about that once in the past. There's a video titled Oko Ruins Everything, I think, where I talked about the timeline of these decks. So these were made, probably being made a couple months ago, and at that time, the mono black control deck, it existed, but it wasn't super popular, and it also, there wasn't like an exact deck list. Like, I don't even think most of them were playing Blood on the Snow. Professor Onyx wasn't being played. Sorin wasn't even printed yet. These decks were playing like, some of them were playing Ebon Death. Meathook Massacre was a big one. A lot of them were playing Tainted Adversary and Graveyard Trespasser. So the decks were just very different, and it also has a very problematic card in Meathook Massacre, which is currently $50 each, and that deck typically played 3 or 4 of them. So the mono black control deck wasn't as popular, and also it was like, it would be difficult to make into a challenger deck because of Meathook Massacre. So I'm not sure if mono black control is going to be the deck. Right now it would be. If Wizards of the Coast was printing this right now, it's easy. You just cut Meathook Massacre, you use Blood on the Snow. Blood on the Snow is like less than $1 each, not a big deal. The Planeswalkers aren't too bad. Professor Onyx is $10, so you can put 1 of those in. Lolth is also like $10 each, so you can put 1 or 2 of those in. Maybe you put another budget black Planeswalker in to make up for the missing Lolth, and the rest of the deck is mostly bulk, so I think this deck is actually very printable. Now, I'm just worried that when they were making this deck, they didn't pick this deck because it wasn't as popular, and at the time, if they were going to put a black deck into the lineup, which they definitely would, they want at least 1 deck of every color, so they definitely would. The most popular black deck at the time was the Rakdos like treasure control deck, the deck that played the treasure package with like Deadly Dispute and Skullport Merchant, you know, like that treasure package alongside Goldspan Dragon and Emmerstrom Predator, or whatever that other dragon was, right? It was a treasure Rakdos sack deck. That's the most popular black deck from a couple months ago. The problem with that deck, once again, we have Goldspan Dragon, so they're already cutting Goldspan Dragons out of another deck. Are they going to want to print it in 2 decks, right? So that's the big issue I'm having with this final deck, is I don't know for sure what deck they're going to pick because, you know, again, right now, obvious, mono black control. But 2 months ago or a month ago, maybe Rakdos Treasure, maybe Rakdos Sack, maybe there was like a mono black aggro deck, but do they want another aggro deck? So my prediction, just to make this simple, because I've been thinking about it and I just don't know, I'm just gonna say there's gonna be a mono black deck of some kind. I say I always get 3 right. This is the one I'm gonna get wrong, but I'm just gonna say mono black control. That's my pick. Won't have Meat Hook Massacre. It should have Blood on the Snow, but it might not even have Blood on the Snow. It might have one of the other board sweepers, Shadow's Verdict, something like that, because they didn't know that Blood on the Snow was going to be so critical to the deck. And you're going to see some weird choices that aren't played now, like maybe Graveyard Trespasser, or maybe Morbid Opportunist. There's that Forsworn Paladin. These cards were kind of played. So my prediction is a bad black control deck, a dated black control deck. They're going to print a black control deck, but it's going to be a black control deck from a couple months ago that's dated and feels weird. And people will complain about it. If it is black control, people will complain that it's weird and the Wizards of the Coast messed up and they printed a bad deck. Why did they ruin the deck? And the reason is because these were made like a month ago, and at the time black control wasn't homogenized. It was very scattered and all over the place because there wasn't like a very solid well-tuned deck list. It was all over the place. So I just expect this deck to be weird if it is mono black control. So there you go, guys. Those are my predictions. Mono green Stompy with Rin and 7 cut. Is it Dragons with Gold Span Dragon cut? Mono white aggro with Intrepid Adversary cut, and then a very weird, outdated mono black control deck. That's my guess. Those are my predictions. We'll see if I'm right. These decks are typically announced in February, in the past anyway. In the past, they were announced February, they release in April. So we should be getting the deck list next month, if there's even challenger decks this year, because I don't know, but if we're getting challenger decks, those are my predictions. So there you go, guys. Thanks for watching. We'll see if I'm correct, and I will see you in the next one.